So coming up on the show, we're going to talk to John Thompson. He's the CEO of Lafayette-based Excepron, who was one of only 43 companies to receive the presidential-level E-Award for Excellence by Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross.
Wow, that's awesome.
We'll talk to him on the show coming up.
Can't wait.
But first, we still have our eyes on what's going on in Baton Rouge, and the headlines this morning talking about a stalemate ending in the House, as yesterday a budget bill advanced with a third of the expiring penny of sales tax being renewed. But that's only going to apparently add up to $370 million. Commissioner of Administration Jay Dardenne joins us on the phone. Sir, we'll start there. What do you make of the developments yesterday on what appeared to be a working holiday?
Well, actually, the budget did not pass. The revenue measure passed.
The revenue measure, yes.
For the first time, we have a substantive revenue bill coming out of the House and headed over to the Senate, which is a good thing. And I think it's important to keep that ball in the air and to make sure everybody understands this isn't giving us the revenue that is necessary to avoid some drastic cuts, but it's keeping the process going. The budget process is going to begin finally, and it's been a week and nothing's happened, but it's going to finally begin today. The only budget bill that's been filed is by Representative Leger, and his bill reluctantly is going to get a hearing in appropriations today. That came about yesterday after a lot of maneuvering on the floor of the House of Representatives. So we'll finally start talking about the budget itself this afternoon.
So if the governor had his way, did he like what happened yesterday, and or what would he change, I guess, would be the big question.
The governor's laid out a plan on how we would get to the $648 million in revenue that we need, and this bill that came out of the House doesn't get there. It gets around half of that. So if the governor had his way, the legislature would implement the budget proposals he's made, the revenue proposals he's made, and there's still time to do that and to accomplish most of that, and we're hopeful that within the next week, because the session must end next Monday, that the legislature will do that so they don't have to come back in yet another special session.
Look, it seems like people are just tired of this process. We see what came with Representative Harris yesterday. We immediately saw a rebuttal sent out to media across the state from the Democrats. Why aren't we seeing multiple plans come out? It seems like there's way more criticism for what's coming out than actual ideas, substantive other measures.
Make it work.
That's a very good point, and I think people are frustrated. I think legislators are frustrated. I know the public is. And you'll have to ask legislators that question. I don't know why the chairman of the Appropriations Committee hasn't and won't file a budget bill. Maybe he'll do that today. I don't know why the Speaker of the House doesn't file a budget bill. The only one that's been filed is Representative Leger's, and that was not even scheduled for hearing until the chairman agreed to do it yesterday on the floor of the House of Representatives to avoid a vote where the House would have been asked to discharge that bill from committee so the whole House could finally get to debate the budget. You have to ask legislators why they're not taking more aggressive action.
Okay, and we could, and we will,
and we
probably,
and we have to.
So, what angle do you think is being played? It's just a stalling tactic. Is it a?
I think there's a certain segment in the House of Representatives that wants to see this session fail and wants to force yet another special session. I can't figure out any other explanation as to why we would have gone an entire week of a 10-day session, or 2-week session rather, and not even think about the appropriations bill. I think there's a large segment of the legislature that really wants to get this done and really wants to see some action so that they can finally fix things in a responsible way. And I think there's a segment of the legislature that is willing to vote for some revenue, but not all the revenue that the governor wants. And our response to that is, fine, tell us what you are going to cut. We saw what the legislature cut during the regular session. Both chambers had budgets that made dramatic and ridiculous cuts in what we need to do as a state. The Senate's version was actually called a pretend budget. That's the budget the governor vetoed because it was make-believe. It wasn't realistic. And so we've been saying it's time for the legislature to deal in reality and recognize that the temporary revenue that they put in place 27 months ago has to be partially replaced. And that's all the governor has asked for. Give the people of Louisiana a $400 million reduction in the taxes they're paying right now and vote for the revenue that's needed to fully fund TOPS, fully fund our partner hospitals, fully fund the Medicaid program without having to kick people out of nursing homes or discontinue services for the developmentally disabled, make sure we fund higher education at a level equal to what we've done this year for the first time in almost a decade, not making cuts. That's what the governor is saying in a very logical presentation as to what we need to do to keep the state going.
You don't have to read very far into your background. You've seen things from the legislator's side. You're obviously seeing things as commissioner administration. And a lot of people have credited you with really being someone who's been a champion of reform. What needs to be reformed here? What's the most important thing that needs to be reformed so next, May 29th, we're not having the same exact conversation with you on this show?
I'd say there are two things. The first would be to reform the tax system as was recommended by the task force that studied this for a year at the legislature's behest. That doesn't seem to be gaining any ground with the legislature, so I don't think we're going to be able to accomplish that and fully change our tax system to make it more fair and balanced and dependable and stable. The second thing would be to avoid more temporary taxes. And this is the direction the legislature is once again heading because the bill that came out of the House expires in 5 years. It's crazy in my mind to create yet another cliff knowingly, and particularly to do that in an election year. And that's what this would do. Not next year's election, but the next election cycle would be when that tax expires, and legislators would be called upon to deal with a major budget shortfall in an election year. That doesn't make any sense to me just from a purely political standpoint, but it's bad policy. The bond rating agencies have told us temporary taxes are bad. It means you don't have a stable funding source. It means you haven't gotten your act together. It's what caused our bond ratings to drop dramatically back before the Stelly plan was enacted. As soon as the Stelly plan was enacted, our bond rating went up because it created a sense of stability. Now we're back to the unstable budget lurching from year to year with temporary taxes.
Okay, and finally, as we're kind of wrapping up, Commissioner, so what's the governor's move at this point? Because Monday is going to be here before we know it.
Well, the ball's in the legislature's court. I mean, it's their job now to pass a budget and to pass a responsible budget by raising the revenue that's necessary to make it work.
But can the governor do anything else to get their attention, I guess is what I'm asking.
He's been doing everything he can do to get their attention and to provide them a roadmap of legislation that would get us where we need to be. And to say to them the budget you passed previously, the pretend budget, obviously is not responsible and acceptable. That's why it was vetoed. So start over and create. It's not really starting over. I shouldn't use that phrase because that's what some people have said they're doing. You don't have to start over. You pick up right where you left off and you figure out how much revenue you're going to have, and then you balance the expenditures against the revenue. That's what has to happen in the course of the next week. And it's a tall order, but it can be done if the legislature gets busy.
All right, Commissioner of Administration Jay Dardenne, as always, sir, we appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up now on 821, so that's the administrative side of that issue. We're going to obviously hear more from Lance Harris and the other folks in the House, and then things have, this bill has passed the House.